We've developed a set of key performance indicators for recruiters that is inclusive of, are you hitting your hiring number? But it's also looking at your conversion rates. It's looking at, the quality of the candidates that you're presenting at various stages in the process. It's looking at things like prospecting and nurturing, because we know that long-term relationship with a prospective candidate actually drives a better conversion rate.
So what does it really take for your business to attract world-class talent today? I'm Dave Travers, president of ZipRecruiter. And on Talent All-Stars, we shine a light on the people and the day-to-day processes behind recruitment and retention at some of the world's most influential businesses. Today's Talent All-Star has been at HubSpot for several years now, starting when it was just about 1,000 people and was a recently public company. Fast forward almost a decade, and Becky McCullough is now HubSpot's VP of Global Talent and Recruiting. Meanwhile, the company, which makes sales and marketing software, has grown to about 8,000 team members. Becky covers a lot of ground in this episode, from how HubSpot has improved the candidate experience, the new KPIs she's developed to measure recruiters' performance, and how she's approached a challenge with retention. So enjoy this conversation with HubSpot VP of Global Talent and Recruiting, Becky McCullough. So take me back to the beginning for us to start. Tell us when you first realized that getting into talent and recruiting might be something that wow, this could be a really good fit for me.
Oh, this is such a great question, because I think like many talent professionals, never went to college planning to be a recruiter. I spent my first few years out of college in corporate strategy. So think spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, building business cases. I was actually at a financial services firm, so very different from tech. That was thriving at the peak of the housing market in the early 2000s. I'm dating myself, and then was at the center of the crash of the housing market. And believe it or not, that's what actually prompted me to get into the people and talent space, because during that time of peak to crash, the firm I was a part of went through a lot of tumult, a dramatic CEO change, massive restructuring, lots of government scrutiny, and a number of layoffs. And during that time, I watched how employees were communicated to or not. And people were uncertain. They didn't have clarity on the future. They didn't feel good in their jobs. And I was like, my gosh, there has to be a way that organizations can navigate through change better. And so I had the opportunity to go back to business school and took went off the beaten path and went to business school to focus in HR, which my husband at the time thought I was crazy. And now he will say it's the greatest choice I ever made. But I took a lot of courses around organizational change and developing high-performing teams and that type of thing. And so that's actually what got me into the people space. And the rest is history. I went into executive search and then transitioned into the role I'm in now.
Amazing. And so then when you were attracted to HubSpot and the opportunity, then walk us through how you thought about you've been in executive recruiting, you got your MBA, you were still at a part of your career where you could go in many different directions. How did you think about taking the leap then?
Gosh, at the time, HubSpot was, to me, kind of this uncharted territory. I had been at very mature organizations, very successful organizations, but they were mature. And I would have, been in organizations that I could join with a really premier brand, solid foundation. And it was my impact was really about iterating on that. HubSpot was about writing an entirely new playbook, taking a startup that had been incredibly successful, already had a really strong culture and brand in the Boston area, and really helping to deliver on our aspiration to become the next big pillar tech company. And so from joining HubSpot was a chance to say, hey, how do we want to hire for scale? How do we want to create the HubSpot candidate experience that not only was going to solve for our internal goals and our internal results, it was going to solve for our candidates, and it was going to solve for our brand. And so I remember quite a few rude awakenings where I came in with a very traditional recruiting playbook and was very quickly told, nope, that's not going to work here. That's not going to work here. And I've learned so much on how to think, not just about solving for a process, but solving for an experience.
Oh, that's great. So when you think about an experience then at HubSpot where, that really made an impact for you or for that you think about as you talk to somebody who's thinking about joining, HubSpot. Give me an example of an experience that really broke through and made an impact.
Okay. This is dating me. This is one of my first few months at HubSpot. One of the things that we wanted to implement was a candidate experience survey. We had never had one before. We were hiring a few hundred people a year. And where I was coming from when thinking about candidate experience was a very mature company perspective. We are going to give you a 50-question survey that took you 20 minutes to fill out. And we were going to be able to dissect every single question and get a ton of data. And I knew that wasn't going to work because we care a lot about simplicity. We care about not interrupting the candidate experience, but really integrating into the candidate experience. And so I had a proposal to be really revolutionary and have a 10-question survey, not 50. And it was going to take you 5 minutes to fill out. And I went in and I presented, here's what our candidate experience survey is going to be. And our head of culture at the time, who went on to be our chief people officer, Katie Burke, who I worked with for years, said to me, nope, that's not going to work. We need a 1-question NPS with how people are going, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend HubSpot to a friend or colleague? And then what feedback do you have from our team? And I was like, oh, this is a really different way about thinking about the experience. Not to solve for our internal processes, but to solve for the value that the candidate gets out of it. And that was my first realization that it was going to be different.
Yes. Okay. So talk to me about somebody put ourselves in the shoes of somebody who's trying to solve for candidate experience today. And if you're just getting started on that journey at a company that maybe hasn't gotten as far as HubSpot, how do you think about that? Give us a golden nugget or two about how to think that through.
Yeah, it's really easy to try to make your candidate experience survey be everything to everyone. And so I think the first thing before you even go designing a candidate experience survey, there are a lot of off-the-shelf surveys out there. You have to have an opinion as an organization of what outcomes you want to drive. If you're an organization that's truly only driving for efficiency in how you hire, then your candidate experience survey should be geared towards that outcome. If you care about winning a Best Place to Work award, then that's the thing you need to drive for. If you care about your stakeholders, that's what you need to focus on. And I will tell you, we had a strong opinion early on. We wanted to solve for candidate experience, but then we started to weave in some other, we want to be able to evaluate performance of recruiters. We want to understand hiring teams. We want to do this. And we actually lost focus in our candidate experience survey for a while because we stopped being opinionated about what our outcomes were that we wanted to drive for. And now we're actually in this journey of recommitting to our goals for our candidate experience survey and kind of weeding out some of the stuff that actually doesn't matter. We're not going to action on that type of thing. So I would say, first and foremost, start with your outcomes you're trying to drive, get alignment on that with the people who have whose opinion matters. And then you go and design the survey that enables that. I
couldn't agree more strongly with that. And in addition, whenever you're doing a survey, that I've had the experience of doing several times in several different circumstances throughout my career, I have never regretted, to your point, simplifying the survey. I've never regretted cutting down the number of questions by a third or a half.
Right. Because if you get if you have a 20 question or 30 question survey, but only a 15% response rate, it's actually not signal. It's just noise because you're only going to get the people on either extreme. The easier you make it, the more meaningful the signal that comes out of it.
Yes. And the other thing is that sometimes I think people doing surveys miss is that the questions up front are going to get a higher response rate than the questions at the end. And the thoughtfulness that goes into answering the first question is going to be much higher. So let's pivot then from candidate experience to then you have risen through the ranks at HubSpot. Now you're an executive. As you went through that journey, rising the ranks in your career, you had to start interacting with more senior people. You weren't just dealing with your direct boss. You weren't just dealing with the candidates you were talking to. How did you go along through that journey, and how did you give us a nugget along the way about where you started to realize, wow, I could be good as a cross-functional partner and leader throughout this organization?
Yeah, gosh, I've learned so much in my journey. And I would say one of the things that, people often ask, what has kept you at HubSpot for so long? People don't usually stay at the same company, especially in tech, for approaching 9 years. And I think that's because my job has never looked the same 2 years in a row, even when I've been in the same technical role. I think it's two things. One, I came from industries where you always had to be very buttoned up and very what I would call client ready. You're in financial services. I was in professional services, consulting. I always had to have a solution, and there was not a lot of space for, a deep debate or uncertainty, I would say. I think for me, as I became, kind of elevated as a leader at HubSpot, I had to get comfortable with the fact that it was okay not having a perfectly polished solution for everything, because that uncertainty actually invites the greatest debate and discussion so you can get clear on what you're solving for. I can think of so many times early in my years at HubSpot where I would go to meet with an executive and have my perfectly polished execution plan. And the leader would kind of say, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. And then after the meeting or after the presentation is where all of the noise would come up, or the debate or the discussion. And I kept asking myself, gosh, why can't I invite more of that? And the realization is you actually, by starting with a question versus a plan, you really get deep on what your stakeholder is actually looking for. How are you really going to solve their problems? And I will tell you, that's something that I learned on the recruiting side. And as my role has expanded to include learning and talent development, I'm almost relearning that in a new context, because when you're in a new role, you want to show them that you've got it handled. You know all the answers. And I think, I've had some recent conversations reminding me of that same coaching of, hey, you don't have to come in with all the answers. It's actually time to come in with the powerful questions to drive discussion.
Ooh, that's so good. So walk me through that, as your roles expanded into learning and development and other areas as well, relearning that process of asking the question, what's the same as you broaden your scope about the initial area where you learned to ask good questions, and what's different about new areas as you do things like learning and development?
Yeah. So I would say the same is just that notion of, hey, start with the question. Hey, what does success look like for you in a year? What are the things that keep you up at night? If you could, fast forward to 6-12 months from now, what would be different in the way your employee experience is? Asking those questions is something that, whether it's in recruiting or the broader talent space, I think the biggest transition in expanding beyond talent acquisition into talent development is TA is super quantitative. I mean, at the end of the day, it's very similar to a sales board. You have hiring targets you need to hit. There's and it's a formula. There is the number that you need to hit and how you do it. And so for me, it has always been very easily, with a background in strategy, to come up with a very operational plan. Here's the number. Here's what we need to hit. Here's how we're going to do it to ensure quality, efficiency, and a great experience. That's like a perfect formula. And it once you understand what motivates your organization and what your organization values, it's not easy, but it becomes very clear very quickly where you need to focus. On the talent side of things, it's very hard to quantify what makes a great manager. What makes a successful employee who doesn't have quantitative metrics like a sales rep or a support rep? And so for me, getting comfortable with defining success, not in terms of output, but in terms of the outcomes we are trying to drive, has been a really big shift for me. And I think that's characteristic of a lot of tech companies who, especially in the past 4 to 5 years, were just struggling to keep up with the pace of how the market was growing. Now, as the market has kind of fallen off a little bit, they have to think differently. And it's not just about hitting the number, it's how you do it. It's making sure you have the foundations in place. And so I think shifting from thinking purely in terms of output to thinking in terms of the outcomes we try to drive and how you do it, and getting clear on your approach is really important, and has been a big learning for me.
Oh, that's so good. So I think you're so right about that. So let's double click on this output idea, because I think in an operational role that is very funnel driven, metric driven, like you talked about, it is very easy to show those sort of input metrics. But when you need to go advocate for yourself, for your team, for a business outcome or a transformation you're trying to drive, getting to those output measures is critical. So talk a little bit about like your experience in successfully navigating your organization or advocating for when you need to go, win more resources, get more time or money or whatever the case may be, and how you use output as a framework to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. In recruiting, this is so critical because it's very easy to have a recruiting org that is hitting their hiring targets very inefficiently. And we, especially as we were growing very quickly, 2021 to 2022, our growth was north of 40%. We were hiring so quickly. We couldn't hire recruiters fast enough to deliver on business goals. And I will tell you, we for a period of time, we were only focused on how many hires a recruiter was hitting each month or each quarter. And I think what we found over time, and especially as our hiring started to slow, is we had some behaviors that were not in line with our values and the competencies that we really value in a high performing recruiter that were being glorified. And so you look around and you see two recruiters who are making the same hires. One is able to do it with half the number of recruiter phone interviews because they are so dialed in to what their hiring manager needs and they have a great understanding. And so I give a ton of credit to my team on this. They formed a task force to really think about how we have, one, redefine what performance looks like. It's not about just quantitative output. It's about the outcomes you are driving for your team. And then how we codify that in how we evaluate recruiters' success and measure their performance. And so we've developed a set of key performance indicators for recruiters that is inclusive of, are you hitting your hiring number? But it's also looking at your conversion rates. It's looking at, the quality of the candidates that you're presenting at various stages in the process. It's looking at things like prospecting and nurturing, because we know that long-term relationship with a prospective candidate actually drives a better conversion rate. And so being able to identify metrics that still get you to your goal of hitting your hiring targets, but in a way that solves for quality and also efficiency is where we've really tried to shift. And I think it's been a journey. I mean, I think there are some recruiters that are appreciative of the clarity. And there are some recruiters that are like, hold on, I just want to crank. I just want to use the numbers. And we needed to empower our champions across our recruiting org to really highlight practicing this work in action. And so the change management in it is so important. It's very easy to have a top-down perspective on how to drive performance and better outcomes. It needs to be owned by your team.
So give me an example, because I think like all of that is so smart. And if you're in a job where you're bombarded with asks and needs all day long, you're not getting all the resources you need necessarily to achieve super high-minded or high ambition goals. It's hard to say, I'm going to take a deep breath today and clarify, align, coach up the people who need a little bit of coaching, and believe that amidst all the other things I have to do, that's going to lead to results. So can you give an example about where all that hard work you talked about with uncertain outcome and coaching somebody up really paid off?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. So I'm going to give an example of a leader on my team who runs all of our go-to-market recruiting. And she has been, we've worked together for a few years now. She joined in a smaller role managing EMEA sales recruiting and has kind of grown up through the org. And when your stakeholders or sales leaders, all you're focused on is output. Are you hitting the numbers? Are you hitting our headcount, et cetera? And what we were finding is that we were hitting our hiring numbers, but we're churning a lot of sales reps. And that's not a recruiting problem necessarily, but we certainly can play a role in controlling the variables. And so one of the things that she has been really focused on in the past 12 months and is kind of on this journey with our stakeholders is how do we shift the focus away from what are we hitting our numbers to how? And how do we make sure that we are really clear on the role that everyone plays in that how, not just recruiters, but hiring managers, interviewers, et cetera. And so what she is currently, and a team underneath her are leading an initiative on, is completely restructuring how we interview sales reps to tie directly back to what defines a sales rep success once they are on board. And that's not revolutionary, but when you're evolving as quickly as a company as HubSpot does, you have to make sure those things are intimately linked, because very quickly, if you change your go-to-market strategy, your how you are building pipeline in a sales role, you need to make sure very quickly that shows up in the interview process. Otherwise, you're going to be hiring the wrong people. And that was one thing that we found, is that we had some slight nuances in our go-to-market strategy and it wasn't necessarily showing up. And so for her, she actually pushed us all and all of our stakeholders to slow down and say, hey, hold on, we got to hit pause. That doesn't mean we need to stop hiring, but we need to start understanding what actually drives better outcomes in terms of retention and sales rep performance. And then we need to build to that. So instead of focusing on what's wrong, let's focus on where we get it right. And let's capture those learnings and then rebuild our whole experience up to meet that. And she's currently in kind of phase 2 of a 3-phase journey of retraining all of our interviewers on how to interview in a way that's much more aligned to what we define in terms of sales rep performance. And so it's a good example of, it's really easy for that to get shoved under the rug for people to say, I don't have time for that. I just got to hire. I just got to make my, hit my interviews and make my hiring decisions. But weaving that in and forcing everyone to take a step back really we believe is going to drive better outcomes from a retention and performance perspective.
Just listening to you, it's very clear how effective you must be in interacting with people throughout your organization, because you are clearly able to zoom in on a talent specific problem and also broaden out to like, what's the business impact of that. So I'd love for you to give an example, like when you're bump into the CEO in the kitchen or get stuck in the elevator with the chief people officer or some other executive, and they're asking, hey, how's it going? Aren't you the new talent person? Like, how's it going? What's your elevator pitch when you are a brand new up and coming leader? How do you communicate?
One of the things, there are a lot of things that I have and will continue to work on as a leader. One of the things I've always prioritized and just prided myself on is really deeply understanding the business and understanding the business context. And I will say, like, when you're in the elevator, when you are, on a Zoom and you and the exec are the first two are on there and we're waiting for everyone else to join, make sure you deeply understand their business, their area of the business, because you never want to be a leader who talks about problems in the context of your team. You want to talk about problems in the context of your organization, or even better, in the context of your customers. We are a customer obsessed organization. And so for me, if I were in that elevator and talking about a recruiting problem, I would not get the respect as if I had come in and talked about it in the context of an organizational challenge. And so one thing I did really early on is I sat down with our leaders. I sat down with our head of sales operations at the time, and I said, tell me about our whole revenue model and why headcount is so important. And he literally, it was back in the days where we were in the office. He whiteboarded for me what it looked like. And so now I can deeply understand how my work and my team's work connects back to the business goals. That's important for you when you're managing stakeholders. It's also super important for your team. And so for me, I also try to always frame the things that our team is working on in the context of the business and view our work as an enabler of the business success, not just hiring numbers or retention numbers or launching a new training program for our employees. It's how it's enabling our mission to help millions of organizations grow better and how it's a part of our strategy. And so that's a little bit of a long-winded answer to your elevator pitch question, but I do think the more you can connect your team's work back to the business challenges and your business strategy, the more you're going to be able to advocate for resources because it's going to resonate with your stakeholders. So I'll give you a quick example. A few years ago, we were seeing just this huge thrash in terms of hiring and headcount numbers and hiring numbers being released. And so many organizations have struggled this. You think you're hitting your hiring targets and then the business dumps 50 more heads on top of your hiring plan. And then all of a sudden you're behind again. And we kept having this thrash. And the conversation I kept having with our executives was, well, recruiting's behind. And my then counterpart in FP&A, who actually now runs workforce planning, and I got together and we said, how do we break this cycle? And we put this whole proposal together that framed it in the context of the business. And we know we need to, in order to hit our revenue targets, hit these headcount numbers. And if we need to dial up, here's how sensitive the model is. And here's the time to hire windows that we know from all of our data, depending on market. And so because of all of that, if you want to be able to go 10% faster, here's what we need to do on the recruiting side to enable that. And so we really, I would say it was pre-COVID. So 2019 got buy-in on, do we want Recruiter to be catching up to our growth or anticipating our growth? And we got buy-in from our executive team. Hey, we want Recruiter to be able to anticipate our growth so that it is not the thing dragging us down and we can capitalize on momentum. And then we were able to build a whole model and what ended up being the foundation of our workforce planning philosophy based on that alignment that we got at the top. And that was solely by focusing on being an enabler to the business.
There's so much good stuff there. So the part that I especially love that I think brings us full circle to the beginning of the conversation is around asking the question, knowing to ask the question. So what I love what you just did is turn it on its head in the beginning and said, rather than give you my 2-minute elevator pitch when you ask me how it's going, I'm going to say, hey, I'm working on this new workforce planning, entire model actually. So it's actually great that I'm here and able to ask you this. I'm really wondering, now that we're so much more focused on efficiency than we were 6 or 12 months ago, what do you need in the operations department that's different than what you needed 6 or 12 months ago? As I think about planning out workforce needs, like that is the best pitch you can give, is showing you are connecting what you're doing to what's the broader business goal or what's happening in the business and showing proactive interest in how you can support that initiative. There's no better pitch for yourself than being able to do that.
You're totally spot on.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, we can see why you are an all-star. Becky, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. So much great stuff today. And we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you so much, Dave. It was great to be on here. Lots of good stuff.
That's Becky McCullough, Vice President of Global Talent and Recruiting at HubSpot. You can find her on LinkedIn. We'll put a link to her profile in the description below. Thanks for watching the show this week. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more episodes like this and leave us a comment mentioning your favorite takeaway from Becky. And remember, we're an audio podcast too. We're in all the podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just search Talent All-Stars and hit follow. I'm Dave Travers, and this has been Talent All-Stars.